Okay, I'm pumped, ladies and gentlemen. We're using Tankathon's latest NFL mock draft, which goes 3 rounds deep to come up with a 2-round mock draft for your Dynasty rookie leagues. Starting off at 1, we're going to go Caleb Williams. Now, I really hope most people come around to Caleb Williams just being the consensus 101 in Superflex drafts in particular. I mean, we saw this in our latest Dynasty startup draft on this channel where you had 9 quarterbacks, I believe, go before the first rookie pick. It was either 8 or 9 QBs, something obnoxious. We're really the only wide receivers that go before the 101 are like Jefferson and maybe Chase and Lamb. So I love Marvin Harrison Jr., but I do want to reiterate, if you're looking at Caleb Williams, he had 11 rushing touchdowns last year, 10 rushing touchdowns the year prior. He has the rushing upside. Going to Chicago, probably a pretty good situation, to be completely honest with you, seeing how good DJ Moore was this past season, plus the fact that this is a team that has additional draft capital this year to continue to build out this wide receiver room. So yeah, I actually like the landing spot of the Chicago Bears, even if Justin Fields obviously failed over the past few. But going over to our next guy, I understand this is going to look very crazy, but I'm sorry, I'm going to take Jayden Daniels here too. Now, in this mock draft, Jayden Daniels goes to the New England Patriots at 3. And if we take a step back and if we look at what this kind of draft capital would mean for Jayden Daniels, we have seen every NFL quarterback essentially over the past 20 years that was drafted inside the top 3 picks get at least 40 games as a starting quarterback in the NFL. The only 2 instances where that did not happen, Jamarcus Russell, arguably the biggest NFL bust in NFL history, and a Mr. Trey Lance. And just like when Trey Lance was selected number 3 overall, coming off a season with over 1,000 rushing yards in college, and I went, oh, okay, yeah, if you have all the rushing upside in the world, and historically speaking, you're guaranteed a starting job, even if you're Blake Bortles, Mitchell Trubisky level bad, I'm going in on you. I'll make the same mistake here with Jayden Daniels. This is a quarterback that had 1,100 rushing yards last year, 855 rushing yards the year prior. Keep in mind, sacks account for negative rushing totals in college, so this would even be more inflated if you remove the sacks. I mean, this kind of draft capital, this kind of rushing upside, you'd be getting a better version for fantasy purposes of Anthony Richardson. And right now, Anthony Richardson is a round 1 startup pick if you are looking at so many different resources. Now, I will go with Marvin Harrison Jr. at 3. Now, I do think you can kind of rearrange all these guys inside the top 5. The top 5 is going to be a massive tier here, right? But with Harrison, one of the best wide receiver prospects that we've seen in quite some time. He had a 38% dominator rating, which is 4th in this class, 3.44 yards per route run, which was 3rd, a 20% touchdown rate, which was 1st, and he drew a target on 32.4% of his routes. That was 2nd in this class. And you have to keep in mind that this is a wide receiver that plays at Ohio State with other top competition. You have another wide receiver that in next year's draft class, most likely going to go round 1. He was a true junior as well. So you're seeing Marvin Harrison Jr. from a production profile perspective with his efficiency in pretty much every metric be at the very top of this class, facing top competition in his own wide receiver room, while at the same time being younger than the majority of these other wide receivers. So the fact that he was the best with the most competition at the youngest age just shows how damn good this guy is, how special he is. Goes to Arizona, will be immediately a wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. I would rank him as about the wide receiver 5 in Dynasty. I think I'm going to prefer Jefferson, Chase, Lamb, probably Amon-Ra St. Brown. But then after that, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is there. And as we go through and look at these wide receivers, I just want to give a shout out to Corey from the Fantasy Stock Exchange. On flogfantasy.com, he put out a rookie wide receiver database, which has legitimately every statistic, every advanced metric that you would ever want to find from this wide receiver class. That's how I'm updating my wide receiver rankings, is using his post on flogfantasy.com. I love it, and I think y'all will as well. And of course, if you're not already on flogfantasy.com, you can get all of our Dynasty rankings, get our Dynasty trade calculator, get a podcast breaking down your Dynasty fantasy football team from yours truly. If you use promo code FLOCK, you're going to get that podcast, 30% off any subscription, plus a free trial to the site for an entire week to see if you like it. So yeah, make sure you take advantage of that. Links in the description comment section. You'll love it. Now, going over to our next guy, we're going to go Drake May. You can easily make the argument to have Drake May over Marvin Harrison Jr., have him over Drake May has rushing upside, right? This quarterback, 9 rushing touchdowns last year at about 700 rushing yards 2 years ago at UNC with a ton of sacks at the same time. And this is a quarterback that'd be going to Washington with his 2nd pick overall. So he has the NFL draft capital to guarantee his job. And at the same time, pretty good situation to be stepping into with Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and hopefully they re-sign Curtis Samuel. Now, going over to Malik Neighbors, this is a wide receiver that you probably want to put right there as a top 10 dynasty wide receiver day one, right? Going back to what we're looking at with overall startup rankings, I got to have Jefferson, Chase, St. Brown, Marvin Harrison Jr., CeeDee Lamb, all ahead of Malik Neighbors. But then after that, once we get into the range of like Puka Nacua, I think you can make a strong argument for Neighbors. I mean, obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. is one of the best wide receiver prospects that we've seen in forever. But Neighbors is not even going to be 21 years old on draft night. Malik Neighbors drew a target on almost 30% of his routes at LSU, which was 4th in this class. He had 3.64 yards per route run, which was 1st. 3.82 yards per team pass attempt, which was 1st. And he has a 93.1 PFF grade, which is 1st. And going back to what we were looking at to put context on this situation, very similar to what you had with Marvin Harrison Jr. This is a wide receiver that played alongside Brian Thomas Jr., who will also be a round 1 draft pick in this year's draft. This is a wide receiver that is also younger than everybody else in this class. So he was the very best of the best at the youngest age alongside top competition competing for targets. So very similar to Marvin Harrison Jr. You have to love both players. Neighbors gets the better landing spot here. And I do think you have a top tier of 5 guys in Superflex drafts. And then obviously in your 1 quarterback leagues, you essentially have Harrison locked in at 1, Neighbors locked in at 2, almost regardless of landing spots. Now going down to our next guy, Rome Odunze is a wide receiver that people are a little bit off of for a couple different reasons. One, if you're looking at his targets per route run, he's down at 25%, which is less than Harrison, less than Neighbors. 2, if you're going to be looking at what you add with his age, he's about to be 22 years old. He stayed 4 years at Washington. And I understand, yes, historically speaking, you don't want to see someone stay 4 years. If you go back to his true freshman year, Washington played like 4 games. They were actually affected by the COVID season. I think this is one of the very rare instances where you can put a little asterisk. While, yeah, he's not an early declare, he has a real reason not to be. He has a very real excuse on why he was not that early declare. He has a 89.2 PFF grade, which is 3rd in this class, top 5 in terms of his yards per team pass attempt. And very similar to the other wide receivers here, you're going to have other top wide receivers in this draft class coming from Washington. So he had a lot of competition in school. The only difference is the efficiency metrics aren't necessarily as clear as the top 2 guys. And at the same time, he's a little bit older, but still a great guy. It'd be a bad landing spot, though, for him with the Giants, at least in my mind. Brock Bowers will be our next guy at 7. If you're playing in a tight end premium format, I think you're going to move Brock Bowers ahead of Rome, but I think you have him behind Rome if it's a non-tight end premium league. And this mock drafts goes to the Indianapolis Colts at 15. Will be a decent landing spot, right? I mean, I think you assume Anthony Richardson does have the majority of the rushing touchdowns in the red zone for this team. But what's very interesting with Bowers, such a playmaker that this is a tight end that had 5 rushing touchdowns at Georgia, which is just nuts to think about. Now, dropping down to our next tier, outside of the top 7 guys here, in my mind, you have a significant tier drop. I think you have a tier of 5 guys in Superflex, then you have the tier of 7, and then beyond that, it's the wild, wild west. But I do want to reiterate, I'm recording this on January 28th, so a lot's going to change with the combine, a lot's going to change with pro days, a lot's going to change with the NFL draft. Now, based off what we have here in this mock draft, Brian Thomas Jr. goes to the Buffalo Bills at 28. Keep in mind, this is a Buffalo team where Stephon Diggs trailed down the stretch. It's a team where Stephon Diggs may be a little bit frustrated with this organization. And you have Josh Allen there, so it's going to be a ton of passing volume to go around. Now, with all that being said, if you look at a lot of these efficiency metrics, they're not good. You're looking at him 15th in the class in yards per route run, 25th in the class in targets per route. But at the same time, we have to take into account that this is a 21-year-old wide receiver, so he's going to be a little bit on the younger side. And at the same time, he had to go up against Malik Neighbors. So while the metrics may not be there that you love, he had the top competition. He's not close to being the same level prospect as the top 3 wide receivers in this class, but he does have some positive marks on his profile. And he has the excuse that Malik Neighbors was in his same offense, obviously impacting the distribution of production. Now, Adonai Mitchell will be our next wide receiver. The metrics here are very bad. Like, as we dive into Mitchell, I think I was maybe a little bit too high on him before we actually had the chance to check out Corey's in-depth wide receiver database. Please, for the love of God, if you're a member of flogfantasy.com, go check out this database. I am literally blown away. But checking it out, I think I was a little bit too high on him initially. That's my Longhorn bias, hook 'em horns. The thing is, he goes to KC here at pick 29 in this mock draft. So if you're going to the Chiefs in round 1, it's going to be hard to get away from you. Very similar to, like, I know a lot of people did not like Rashee Rice as a prospect. I didn't really like Rashee Rice as a prospect, but the second that he goes to the Chiefs in the second round, I'm like, okay, I got to draft the hell out of this guy. So it'd be kind of the same thing with Adonai Mitchell here, where maybe I don't love him as a prospect. The 74 PFF grade, this 22 in the class, 23rd in yards per team pass attempt, second last in yards per route run with 1.68. He only drew a target on 18.5% of his routes. So the metrics here are very bad. It's all about the landing spot for this pick. Keon Coleman will be our next guy. Don't love the metrics here either. 24th PFF grade for the class. 19th in his yards per team pass attempt, 23rd in yards per route run, 16th in targets per route. He's a couple different things going for him, though. One, he was at a team that had other NFL caliber wide receivers on that depth chart. So you can say, okay, well, maybe the metrics would have been a little bit better if he had less competition. 2, very young as well. He's going to be not even 21 years old at the time of the NFL draft. So you do have to get a little bit of a premium based off the age that he was and that competition. But he would land in Dallas at 24 and honestly would be a natural fit for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, someone that I actually like a lot more than Mitchell, I like him a lot more than Coleman, and I think that I'll actually have him ranked ahead of Brian Thomas Jr. as well, is Troy Franklin. Troy Franklin checks all the boxes, right? Only going to be 21 years old at the age of draft night. He was 4th in PFF grade this year, 87.3, 10th in yards per team pass attempt, 5th in yards per route run, and 6th in targets per route run. So overall, you love the metrics profile with Troy Franklin. The issue is, in this mock draft, he would be going to the Baltimore Ravens. While Lamar obviously is elite in fantasy and Lamar is an elite real-life NFL quarterback, a lot of that value comes on the ground. So it is not necessarily the best offense ever if you're a receiver. Like, look at how good Zay Flowers was this year. And it's not like Zay Flowers was too big of a difference maker in fantasy. So what I would really hope for is I would hope that Franklin lands in Dallas, that he lands in KC, that he lands in Buffalo, so we can have him ranked ahead of these other wide receivers. Now we're going to throw some quarterbacks here. We're going to go J.J. McCarthy, 43, Atlanta Falcons. I mean, if he goes to Atlanta here at the top of the second round, probably a Levis situation, right? Where maybe he doesn't start right away, but he should be starting at some point in his rookie season. And J.J. McCarthy had some rushing upside at Michigan. I mean, 2 years ago, he did go out there and he had 300 rushing yards. Pretty young quarterback. It would be a very good situation in Atlanta, considering the fact, obviously, you have Pitts and you have London. Now, Michael Penix will be our next guy. Goes early second round to the New York Giants. Almost similar situation to what we're talking about with Levis, right? You go early round to a team that has a quarterback, but I think it would make a lot of sense for the Giants not to take a quarterback at the very top of round 1 here, but instead just take a quarterback in the second round if you're going to take a shot on Diggs, Penix, or McCarthy, and essentially say, oh, okay, well, we're still going to give Daniel Jones a shot. If he comes back this next season and he looks like the guy, then cool, we got him. But if not, we at least have someone else that we can roll the dice on. And then Bo Nix will be our next quarterback. It goes to Minnesota at 42 here, so similar spot. Bo Nix also has some rushing upside. I mean, 2 years ago at Oregon, he had over 500 rushing yards and 14 rushing touchdowns at the same time. Obviously, Bo Nix is a million years old, but if he were to go round 2 in the NFL draft to Minnesota, he'd have some shot. It would just come down to, does this team re-sign Cousins? They re-signed Cousins for like a year and then took a quarterback in round 2. I could see that making sense as well. Now, let's get over to our Texas Longhorns yet again. We're going to go Jonathan Brooks, 15. What is crazy is if you go through and pull up the prospect rankings on flogfantasy.com right now, you will see that Jonathan Brooks, the first running back ranked in our expert rankings. And at the same time, I believe in the consensus expert rankings, you have like 9 wide receivers ahead of the first running back. It is absolutely nuts what we're looking at this year. Literally looks like 2014. But would be a good landing spot going to the Dallas Cowboys. We have no idea what Dallas is going to be like at running back this next season. And at the same time, this is a running back that's been efficient his entire career at Texas, every season averaging over 6 yards per carry. This is a running back that, more importantly, showed his upside as a receiver this past season. He had 25 receptions for almost 300 receiving yards before going down with an injury for the Texas Longhorns. I like the rushing upside. Obviously, it will suck if we don't get the testing numbers, but it is what it is. Round 2, NFL draft capital would be great. Now, going over to our next guy, I would love this landing spot for Xavier Worthy. I think Xavier Worthy may be a wide receiver that I rank ahead of Mitchell. I may move him ahead of Coleman. I think in our wide receiver rankings, he'll be higher than this in comparison to some of the other guys that we took ahead of him. The issue is those other guys, right, like Mitchell, Coleman, Tom, they all find beautiful landing spots round 1. Here, Xavier Worthy goes early round 2 to the Tennessee Titans. I think from a real life perspective, this would be a great fit where Worthy's that smaller, speedy wide receiver that can stretch NFL defenses and maybe be a complement and take some pressure off of DeAndre Hopkins, but not necessarily someone that we project out to command a ton of volume. Pretty mediocre in a lot of these metrics. You're looking at 11th with his targets per route run, 15th with his yards per route run, 9th with his yards per team pass attempt, 24th with his PFF grade. Of course, this is compared to other wide receivers in this class, but he is only 21 years old, so you have to put a slight premium on him for that reason. He's a lot younger than a lot of these other guys. And also he had some target competition with Mitchell there as well. Like the perfect example is if you want to compare him to Xavier Legette, another wide receiver who goes at the very top of round 2. This Xavier actually dominates if you're looking at these metrics, where he was 5th with his yards per team pass attempt. He was 5th with his PFF grade, 8th with his yards per route run. And yeah, you can be very excited about all those metrics, but you have to put it into the context that he's 23 years old. So a lot of times we see this over and over and over again, that a wide receiver can stay 4 or 5 years, and in year 5, the man goes out there and he absolutely dominates when he's going up against true freshmen. He's going up against kids that just hit puberty a couple years ago, and the man is pretty much rocking an entire family at this point. It's just tough when you're comparing these 23-year-old guys to 18-year-old kids. So the production can be great. The metrics can be great for his final season, but this is a player that did nothing as a freshman, did nothing as a sophomore, did nothing as a junior. It took him forever. Historically speaking, that's very bad for your expected hit rate. And the landing spot going to the New England Patriots wouldn't be great either. I understand that they do select Jaden Daniels in this draft, which obviously I'm very high on Jaden Daniels for a fantasy perspective. You see that we have him as high as quarterback 2 here. But the reason I'm high on him from a fantasy perspective is his rushing upside. I'm not expecting him to come out here and be top 10 in the NFL and passing yards. Now, our next guy will be Trey Benson. I mean, he obviously is the other running back that a lot of people are looking at in this class. In this mock draft, it goes in the middle round 3 to Green Bay. You have Aaron Jones possibly as a cap casualty, not this season, but maybe the next year. He's not going to be there 2 years from now. And then also A.J. Dillon is a free agent as well. So it'd make a lot of sense if A.J. Dillon were to leave this offseason for them to bring in Trey Benson. Benson has split the backfield with Aaron Jones. And then maybe Benson gets a shot at it long-term when Aaron Jones leaves. Now, Ladd is a wide receiver that I know a lot of people are excited about. And I initially completely wrote him off saying, okay, well, if we're going to go through and look at his dominator rating, it's trash. If we're going to look at his break, a lot of things are not impressive at all on his profile. However, he only ran 148 routes this past year due to injuries. So if you instead look at him from a route run perspective, he was 6th in this draft class and yards per route run. He was 12th in this draft class with his targets per route. Obviously, the counting stats like yards per team pass attempt, he's 27th. He's very bad, but that's because he barely played, right? So it is very confusing. If you're looking at his PFF grade, they have him at 11th, which is right in the middle of the road here. He is 22 and a half years old at the time of the NFL draft, though. So he's an older wide receiver. He was decent off a very limited sample. He wasn't like super special off that limited sample. but a wide receiver that would find a good landing spot where he goes to Cleveland with pick 54. I mean, obviously, this is a depth chart that you can go to the top of. It's a possibility. Now, going over to our next running back, very excited to see what happens to the NFL Combine. I want to see his size. But Bucky Irving is a running back that showed a considerable amount of receiving upside. With his final season at Oregon, he has 56 receptions and 413 rushing yards, which obviously this is an Oregon passing offense that just has a ton of production to go around. But even with that being said, I mean, this is still phenomenal from a market share perspective. The issue is he's probably not going to be big enough to go out there and handle a 3-down workload. I mean, a lot of what we are going to see here with guys like Blake, Bucky, I mean, even throwing, I don't know, Will Shipley, is going to come down to the NFL Combine. Do they have the athletic traits? Do they have the size? Blake Corum is probably going to be a good real-life running back, right? Like, you can see him being a very good grinder. 27 rushing touchdowns this past season. The issue is he's not going to be a great receiving back out of the backfield. We want to see that top-end speed. Will Shipley, running back coming out of Clemson, was a fine receiving back. I mean, 2 years ago, he had 38 receptions. So, I mean, a lot of these running backs you're somewhat excited about, and you can definitely see them turning into, like, committee guys with upside. There's just no Bijan Robinson. There's just no Jahmyr Gibbs in this class. Now, going over to the next guy, we're going to go to Malachi Corley, who's a wide receiver that I'm starting to be a little more excited about. He was 8th in PFF grade, number 1 in targets per route run, 11th in yards per route run. So the spans of target dog, you'd be going to the Jets. Jets is a very interesting spot, and then you have a 41-year-old quarterback coming off a torn Achilles, but obviously he's a Hall of Fame player. So it's very hard to know what we're going to have at QB. It does seem like it'd be a nice compliment to Garrett Wilson, though, where the wide receiver room is extremely shallow. And then our last guy will be Johnny Wilson. Obviously, you had other top competition in this offense. He was 4th in yards per route run, 5th in targets per route run in this class, 20th in PFF grade. The issue is this is another 23-year-old wide receiver where it is difficult to go out there and just say, oh, okay, he is 4th in yards per. No, you can't just rank him next to a 20-year-old guy and say that is a one-for-one comparison. Obviously, we have to keep everything in context. But I think that's all we have for you. Really do appreciate you checking out this video, and remind you, please go check out the wide receiver database that Corey put out. I mean, phenomenal. I love it. I'm going to update my wide receiver rankings based off of it, and he said that he is going to get a running back database out any day from now. So please make sure y'all are on the lookout for that on flockfantasy.com. And of course, if you want to get access to all my rankings on flockfantasy.com, all the rankings for all your favorite creators, plus all those premium posts, and our Dynasty trade calculator, and yours truly to break down your Dynasty fantasy football team in a podcast. Find all that with promo code FLOCK on flockfantasy.com. Promo code FLOCK is going to get yours truly to break down your team in a podcast, plus 30% off any subscription and a free week trial. But I think it's all I have for you. Really do appreciate you, ladies and gentlemen. I really hope you have a great day, and really hope we get to see you out with the video tomorrow.